something. Did anyone catch that? Over.
Copy, wait, what's going on? Mayday! We've got a ranger down. Feeding circle, wolves are attacking. We need immediate backup now.
Who is it?
June Ellis, she's not responding.
June? She fed them, named them, protected them.
And now they've surrounded her? How?
Pack of wolves she spent years rehabilitating. Turned on her in seconds. It's chaos out here.
That sanctuary! It was supposed to be safe!
Her coworkers swear she was careful. Supervisor said it was unthinkable. But what we're seeing, this wasn't an accident.
Then what was it? Terror hearing.
Or something much darker.
Welcome to True Animal Terrors, where real danger meets real stories. Don't look away. Stay with us as we uncover the heartbreaking true story of June Ellis. And welcome to True Animal Terrors, where real danger meets real stories. The scent of pine needles and damp earth lingered in the air, drifting down from the shadowed ridgelines of northern Montana. Here, tucked deep into the pine-covered slopes, lay Bear Valley Wildlife Sanctuary, a place that didn't just house animals, but guarded the wild itself. It was a sanctuary for creatures left broken or alone by the brutality of the outside world. And at the center of it all was June Ellis. To most visitors, June was a park ranger. To those who worked beside her, she was the heart of Bear Valley. She had arrived at 24 straight from the University of Montana with a degree in wildlife biology and a quiet fire in her eyes. It wasn't ambition that drove her, it was purpose. Over the next decade, she became the ranger who arrived before sunrise and left long after the moon had risen, the one who could be found curled up in a sleeping bag inside the observation cabin during the bitter weeks of wolf pup recovery season. By 2024, June had earned the title of Senior Wolf Rehabilitation Specialist. But among her colleagues, she was something else entirely, the wolf whisperer. She knew every wolf by name, by gait, even by the pitch of their howls in the dark. Brutus, the dominant male, whose amber eyes could pin a man in place. Luna, the shy female she'd once nursed through a shattered leg with the patience of a saint. Tagger, the restless young male whose energy never seemed to fade. Her journal, later found in her cabin, read like a love letter to the wolves she'd raised from orphan pups. It was filled with detailed notes on feeding times, pack hierarchies, subtle signs of illness, and even descriptions of what she called their emotional weather. These wolves had been abandoned after their packs were poached, driven out by wildfires, or left motherless along logging roads. To outsiders, they were dangerous predators. To June, they were family. She knew them better than anyone, said fellow ranger Elijah Barlow, who had worked with her for 6 years. Maybe even better than she should have. That unwavering trust, the thing that made her legendary at Bear Valley, was also the thing that would one day put her in danger. Because no matter how deep the bond, a wolf never forgets what it is. Bear Valley wasn't a roadside zoo. It was 140 acres of fenced wilderness, carved into the granite spine of Montana's backcountry. Here, logging roads vanished into nothing, and radio signals were swallowed by steep alpine ridges. Founded in 1997, the sanctuary was meant to give second chances to animals that should never have survived wolves hit by trucks, pups, orphaned beside steel traps, packs, shattered by poaching, or burned out by wildfire. By spring of 2024, Bear Valley held 12 gray wolves ranging from 7-month-old rescues to alphas in the twilight of their lives. Unlike in traditional zoos, the wolves lived in semi-wild enclosures. Human contact was kept to a minimum. In theory, in practice, feeding had to happen, and that's where the lines blurred. Every evening, shortly before dusk, rangers would make their way to the feeding circle, a small clearing inside the northwest enclosure. The system was simple meat drops at specific points wolves called in with signals, rangers positioned just outside the perimeter fence. On paper, it was safe. In reality, it worked only because of trust. And no one trusted more than June Ellis. She preferred to do the feedings herself, not out of ego, but because she believed she could read the wolves' moods. She would stand there, arms loose at her sides, watching as they ate. She'd note which wolf stepped forward first, which one hung back, and which one kept glancing over its shoulder. But over time, the space between reading the animals and being part of the pack began to narrow. When wolves start associating a human with food, you're not just feeding them anymore, warned Dr. Robert Kessler, a wildlife biologist who consulted with Bear Valley in 2022. You're stepping into their pack structure. And in that structure, there are rules that have nothing to do with human safety. By early September 2024, June wasn't just a feeder. She was part of the wolves' rhythm, familiar, predictable, unarmed. And in the animal kingdom, predictability can be a vulnerability. The warning started small, easy to dismiss. Wolves that once lingered at the edge of the clearing began pressing closer during feedings. Brutus started arriving early, holding her gaze longer than usual, his eyes steady, unreadable. Tagger was spotted pacing along the boundary fence late at night, his movements slow and deliberate. Then came the breaches. One night, Luna crept into the staff camp and dragged off a bag of freeze-dried meat from a table left unattended. On another, 3 wolves circled the fire pit where 2 rangers were talking. Their tails were stiff, their bodies tense, and they moved in slow, deliberate arcs. It wasn't curiosity, said Staff Ranger Kelsey Vaughn, who had worked beside June for nearly 5 years. You could feel it in your gut. They were testing us. The incidents were written into the sanctuary's logbook kept in the main office. The entries for late summer told their own story. August 28th, Brutus advanced beyond the feed zone boundary, no vocalization. September 3rd, Luna pawed at a food cooler near the cabin porch, staff advised. September 10th, Subpack approached Ranger tent during night, backed off after spotlight. Each time June read the notes, each time she brushed them off with the same calm assurance. They're just curious, she would say, a faint smile on her lips. But curiosity in the wild has sharp teeth. Bear Valley had no cell service, no on-site security, just fences, radios, and the unspoken knowledge that if something went wrong, help would arrive too late. June knew that. She knew the risks, but she also believed in her wolves and believed in the mission. Somewhere in the margin of an incident report, June Ellis had scrawled in neat looping handwriting, "These are wolves being wolves. They're asserting presence, not aggression. Maintain routine, stay predictable." Not everyone agreed. I told her we needed to change the schedule, maybe alternate feeders, recalled Ranger Kelsey Vaughn. But June, she had that certainty, like she knew them better than anyone. She said changing patterns would confuse the pack and escalate tension. Science, however, had long warned against that kind of overconfidence. Back in 2002, Dr. Mark McNee of Alaska's Department of Fish and Game had published a study analyzing hundreds of human-wolf encounters. His conclusion was sobering: wolves that grow habituated to human presence and food sources can begin testing boundaries. Once a wolf no longer sees humans as a threat, it begins to see them as an opportunity. And in Bear Valley, the wolves had already crossed that threshold. They weren't curious anymore, they were calculating. Still, June walked into the feeding circle every evening. No weapon, no deterrent, no backup. In her mind, she wasn't entering enemy territory. She was coming home, but to the wolves, the line between human and prey had already begun to blur. By September 14, 2024, that line would vanish entirely. It was a Saturday evening. The sun had just dipped behind the jagged ridge, casting long shadows over the tree line. At exactly 6:03 p.m., according to the ranger station's clock, June pulled on her gloves and lifted 2 metal buckets of elk and venison from the cooler. The meat was fresh from a roadkill salvage run, stacked neatly in tins and loaded into a plastic sled. She radioed in, heading to circle. 12 wolves, all accounted for. Those would be the last words anyone ever heard from her. Junior staffer Logan Brewer offered to help. As always, June declined. "They know me," she told him. "If we add someone new, it could spook them." At 6:11 p.m., she entered the northwest enclosure through Gate C, a rusted service entrance that opened directly into the feeding circle, a 40-foot wide clearing bordered by tall pine and dense brush. The gate shut behind her with a metallic snap. They were already there. Brutus, Luna, Tagger. 9 more, their shapes melting in and out of the shadows, silent, waiting. June began her familiar clockwise route. Drop the first bucket, step back, murmur each name as she placed the food. No eye contact, no rush. Her voice was calm, steady like water over stone. At the 3rd drop point, Brutus's spot, she backed away as she'd done hundreds of times. But this time, Brutus didn't move toward the meat. He moved toward her. Ears flat, tail high, a low vibrating growl in his chest. June froze, one hand lifting instinctively, not to command, but to pause. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other, neither moving. Then Tagger darted in from the side, fast. June turned too late. A blur of gray and black erupted from the shadows. First 1 wolf, then 3, then the whole pack. The circle collapsed in seconds. Her scream was short, sharp startled cutting through the stillness and carrying all the way to the outer camp. Help was all anyone heard before the sounds turned primal, snarling dirt scattering under claws, the clang of metal buckets skittering across the ground. The wolves didn't chase, they surrounded. This wasn't pursuit, it was a takedown. The ranger who had named them, fed them, touched them, was now on the ground beneath them. In less than 20 seconds, a decade of trust dissolved under the crush of teeth. Chaos erupted in the camp, just 200 yards away. Logan Brewer was prepping gear when the radio crackled to life. Mayday, Ranger down. Wolves attack, feeding circle need immediate backup. Logan dropped everything and ran. Ranger Maya Torres was right behind him. They charged through Gate C, shouting and banging buckets together. The wolves scattered in a flurry of growls and snapping branches, retreating into the forest beyond the clearing. June lay motionless on the dirt, her uniform torn, deep puncture wounds seeping dark blood from arms and legs. Her breathing was ragged, eyes shut. Logan called for emergency medics. Within minutes, Dr. Simon Caldwell, the station's medic, was kneeling beside her. His hands moved quickly, wrapping bandages, checking vitals, but his expression was grim. Severe lacerations, possible internal bleeding, he reported into the radio. A call went out to the medical evacuation unit in Helena, 45 minutes by air. By the time the helicopter arrived, darkness had swallowed Bear Valley, its red and white strobes casting fleeting light over the pines. Paramedics loaded June into a stretcher, securing her as the blades thundered overhead. Back on the ground, the sanctuary team stood frozen in silence, shaken by the violence they had just witnessed. At St. Patrick's Regional Hospital, despite emergency surgery and transfusions, June Ellis succumbed to her injuries within hours. The official cause of death, severe bite wounds with catastrophic arterial damage injuries, too extensive to survive. The news rippled far beyond Bear Valley. The Montana Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks launched an investigation alongside the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The next morning, investigators walked the feeding circle, marking tracks, collecting scat. The evidence was clear: the entire pack had participated. Experts agreed that the wolves had been conditioned by years of close familiar feeding. The natural boundary between predator and caretaker had eroded until it no longer existed. The report drew unsettling parallels to the 2005 Carnegie wolf attack in Alaska, where a habituated pack killed a biologist during feeding. Both tragedies pointed to the same truth: when predators lose their fear of humans, the outcome can turn deadly. In the weeks after June's death, Bear Valley underwent sweeping changes. Electric fencing was installed around the feeding circle. All direct feeding ceased indefinitely. Access to wolf enclosures was sharply restricted, and safety protocols were rewritten from the ground up. The media swarmed. At a press conference in Helena, Governor Linda Prescott spoke with a voice heavy with both sorrow and resolve. "We mourn the loss of Ranger June Ellis, a dedicated public servant who gave her life to protect Montana's wildlife. Her death is a stark reminder that respect for the wild must never give way to complacency." The tragedy at Bear Valley sent shockwaves through Montana and beyond, igniting a fierce debate about how humans should interact with wild predators. Officials were blunt: the rules had to change. This tragedy highlights the need for stricter guidelines on human interaction with wild predators. The sanctuary's board announced in a public statement, "We are committed to reforms that protect both our citizens and our wildlife." Experts from across the country added their voices. Dr. Nathan McNee, a respected biologist who has spent decades studying predator behavior, explained the danger with surgical precision. Once wolves start associating humans with food, their natural instincts shift. They become bolder, more assertive, sometimes dangerously so. This is not just animal behavior, it's a serious public safety concern. The sanctuary's new policies reflected those warnings. Hands-on feeding was replaced with remote delivery systems. Human presence inside wolf enclosures was reduced to an absolute minimum. Rehabilitation would focus on keeping wolves wild, not accustomed to people. June Ellis's death was more than a personal tragedy. It was a pivot point for wildlife management across the region. Her story became a stark reminder: no matter the bond, no matter the years of trust, wild animals remain unpredictable forces of nature. Across the nation, wildlife experts echoed a truth too often forgotten. Feeding wild animals, even in a controlled sanctuary, carries profound risk. Feeding wildlife disrupts their natural behaviors, Dr. McNee emphasized. Habituation erodes their innate fear of humans, and that fear is essential to their survival and ours. Public safety bulletins soon followed. The message was simple, urgent, and absolute: never feed wild animals under any circumstances. Even those raised in sanctuaries can revert to instinct when startled, threatened, or confused. Habituation, whether accidental or well-intentioned, can transform an animal's curiosity into aggression in an instant. June's story became a cautionary tale, whispered in ranger stations and conservation meetings alike. It underscored the razor-thin balance between compassion and caution in wildlife work. Her devotion to the wolves was never in doubt, but the lesson she left behind was unshakable: nature must be met on its own terms, not ours. The loss cut deep. Friends, family, and fellow rangers gathered on a crisp August morning for her memorial. The air was sharp with the scent of pine, the mountains rising like sentinels around the sanctuary she had poured her life into. A plaque was unveiled at the main entrance, its inscription etched into bronze. In memory of June Ellis, guardian of the wild protector of the pack. Ranger Logan Brewer, visibly moved, spoke softly but with resolve. June saved countless wolves through her care and commitment. We won't let her death be in vain. Her legacy will guide us to work safer, smarter, and always with the utmost respect for the wild. Though her voice is gone, June's story remains a solemn, enduring reminder that the wild is not ours to tame. Respect for its boundaries is not only the key to our safety, but to the survival of the creatures we strive to protect. And in the whisper of wind through the pines at Bear Valley, it's easy to imagine her still walking the ridgelines, watching over her pack from just beyond the tree line. June Ellis's story is more than a tragedy. It's a reminder of how thin the line is between trust and danger in the wild. If her legacy moved, you share this story so others can learn from it. And if you want more true accounts where courage meets nature's raw power, subscribe and turn on notifications, because there are more stories waiting and you won't want to miss the next one.